Welcome in, folks. It is the Daily Destroyer, the DFS show on the Dynasty Warzone Network. I'm your co-host at FF Tyler O, joined as always by my man at Lou Dog Sherman. We are recording 4 o'clock on a Friday. That is important always, but it's even more important now because we just got a ton of crazy news coming our way. A lot of rescheduling that does affect the slate a lot, to say the least. Just to go over that, so in case you folks weren't aware, that Raiders-Browns game wasn't on the main slate anyways, but that got changed. But there were two games on this main slate that did get shifted to Tuesday. The Rams-Seahawks, which we were looking at as a pretty juicy matchup, that game is no longer on the main slate. That is on Tuesday. And the Eagles-Washington football team, maybe looking at that just a little bit, but that is now off the slate. So we went from an 11-game slate to a 9-game slate for the main slate on DraftKings. It's going to make things interesting. There's definitely some guys that we were excited about that are no longer going to be available, but that is just how it goes. We adjust. Athletes adjust. DFS athletes adjust. It's what we're doing here today. Let's kick it off with the quarterbacks. I'll give it over to you, Lou. You kick us off here. Your favorite quarterback play of the week.
Yeah, the games that got moved are pretty much making quarterbacks, I'd say, a little more straightforward than normal this week. A lot of weeks you can kind of play most quarterbacks and then you get different elsewhere. But this week there's a lot less like good plays because there's backup quarterbacks in a lot of these spots on top of the games that got moved. Some of the good quarterbacks were in those games as well. But yeah, for me this week, it's kind of like you could play Kyler Murray up against the Lions at 7,900, or you just go down. Dak Prescott 6,500. He hasn't really been getting you that many fantasy points of late. He's been throwing more picks recently,
Not playing
but
well.
he is facing the Giants, so it's in a decent spot for him. My favorite play is probably going to be Tua at 5,700 against the Jets, but it's going to be pretty highly owned. I think before this news, Jalen Hurts was a guy I was looking at a lot, but now without him in, we'll probably see people mostly going to Tua. And, Tua just faced the Jets a few weeks ago, had 18 fantasy points in that game, and he hasn't really been getting 30 fantasy points games. He only has 2 games all year over 25, but for 5,700, he seems like one of the safer quarterbacks on the board, especially against the Jets.
Yep, I'm with you on that one. He's going to be the top play considering. Another quarterback that I have interest in is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo playing against the Falcons. Similar price. I think when a lot of people go to Tua, that pretty much same price. If you want to be a little bit different, going to Jimmy might be the move. Atlanta's their run defense has been quite good, especially over the second half of the season. And their pass defense has been pretty bad. And in fact, the Falcons allow the third highest passing success rate in the NFL right now. And then with no Elijah Mitchell, they're going to string together a running back room of Jeff Wilson, who disappointed a bit last week, and Debo, who doesn't disappoint, but is still kind of like this hybrid player. So to me, the path of least resistance for the 49ers to win this game against the Atlanta defense with a great run defense and a terrible pass defense is to let Jimmy sling it. Maybe you see a little bit more Debo as the wide receiver. We know Ayuk's going to be out there. Kittle's been absolutely smashing. So, it's one of those games when I take a peek at Jimmy Garoppolo, things that have not been that bad lately, too, if you take a look at his stats. Like, he had that 12-point game, but over the last, 6 games, 20, 18, 12, 15, 15, 23, like that. And we talk about, it's kind of like Tua, right? Where there seems to be, the floor is fine and the upside's a bit capped. But I do think, considering this offense and its offensive weapons, I think the passing attack on the 49ers does present itself with a bit more upside than the Dolphins.
Yeah, I like that take. It's some of it has to do with who your options are. And for Tua, one of his favorite go-to guys this year, Waddle, is out in this game.
Yep.
So, I mean, that could hurt him in general, just the guy that you're more comfortable with throwing to. Waddle has a bunch of games with over 8 catches this year, and he's kind of been the favorite target of Tua. So without him in there, I think that could somewhat hurt the upside. Like I'm expecting Tua to be the most owned QB. So in that sense, I probably won't be playing him in big tournaments.
Fair.
That's where like Jimmy's really interesting. The other guy who I have a lot of interest in, and I didn't realize I'd be saying that sentence this year, is Davis Mills. He is, I mean, this guy has been like quietly balling out when given opportunity. His last 2 full games of playing, he has 24 and 21 fantasy points. He's 5,400. He's facing the Jaguars defense. The Urban Meyer news, this was one of the big stories of the week. And to me, like when teams lose their quarterback, or I mean their coach, a lot of times like there's 2 ways that it can go. Either like they have this crazy bounce back because they're all like against the coach, or they just look broken. But for me, like this is the week for Davis Mills to ball out and like have a good game. He threw the ball 49 times last week in a game that they lost by 20. But that's I don't want to say that's the concern for me, but I think this could sneakily be a game that is just like there's no defense involved at all, and they just go back and forth, and there's a lot of high scoring. So I kind of have interest on Davis Mills because I think people are going to go to this Tua and Garoppolo more often, and if not, like maybe they just go up to a Burrow at that point. So what's your take on Davis Mills? Like, I feel like he's someone that you could probably pick up in season long and start this week as well.
Yeah, Davis Mills, the matchup's good. It pains me to say he's a decent cash option. Like, I don't know if I'm necessarily there yet. I mean, but Jacksonville does allow the 3rd highest EPA per drop back. They're bottom of the league in terms of just pass defense. I mean, this is just a team that you can pass on. So if you want to play Davis Mills, is okay. I guess my thing with Davis Mills, like I would be a little more interested in Davis Mills had he been like 48 or like 5K. But
yeah, he's
for
too
him,
close to Tua.
Yeah, he's just too close to Tua and Teddy Bridgewater. And then Mike in the chat actually brought up a good point here. Mentioned that Tyron Smith is out for Dallas, and that is confirmed. It's a question, but it is confirmed that Tyron Smith is out for Dallas, and that is something to consider, especially considering Dak's woes as of late.
Yeah, so and this is where when I was saying before, where usually there's a lot of options at QB, but here, one thing we talked about before we started was I could see there be a lot more quarterbacks that are 10+% owned this week versus other weeks. So if you have a strong conviction on like some random guy, even if it's like Ryan Tannehill against the Steelers, like I don't know if people are going to be on him that much, but the fact that there are so many like backup quarterbacks that are out there, or just injuries, COVID, like a lot of people are out. It could be just a wild week in general that, I think it's going to be very condensed where like ownership comes into play. We haven't specifically talked about Josh Allen, but you had to take that you don't really want to play Josh Allen at all this week.
Yeah. So I guess it's more so. I know we saw the 100 rush yards last week, but I mean, we at least agree that that's not something we expect to back-to-back weeks. It's really he's $200 cheaper than Kyler, and I'd rather go Kyler against a soft Detroit defense. But it's just really looking at the matchup for me. The Panthers are currently allowing the 2nd lowest pass success rate in the NFL right now. 5th lowest DPA per dropback. I actually got that from Living the Stream. Just give them a little credit there, but it's just the Panthers have been incredible lately against the pass. And they're also one of the most largest like run funnels. So it's basically if you want to beat the Panthers, you run the damn football. That doesn't set itself well for the Bills' play style. I get it. The Bills are a team that will play an entire half of football without handing it off to a running back. But with that said, it's more so about the game environment, the game script. I expect this to be a little bit more of a slog because I think the Panthers defense sets itself up well against how the Bills want to play offense, and the Panthers offense is bad. So I mean, this is one of those games where like I could perceive like, if this isn't a betting show, but I could see myself like wanting to go for the under in that game, just because I don't think there's a lot that's going to be happening in terms of offense. Like right now it's a 45 44.5 point total, which is fair. But I really think that this goes under, and it's a little bit disappointing from an offense perspective for the Bills. I think they still get it done, but I guess for 8,100 and Kyler at 49 versus the Lions, it's a pretty easy pick to Kyler for me.
Yeah. And to go off that point that you made, like, this is probably a big under week in general. Teams just want to get this week over with. We've already seen games getting suspended. I would assume with this already being Friday and they announced those 3 games that we won't see other games postponed. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that at this point.
Yeah, I feel like they wanted to make it wait until Friday and announce the games that are specifically getting postponed. The Browns one was like obvious. They had 22 players on the list or whatever.
Yeah, and a fun fact, the Eagles, who don't have any COVID cases, are now playing 3 games in 13 days, Lou.
Yeah.
That's gonna be brutal. Boned. They got boned, dude. Unfortunately. All right, pool of 3 quarterbacks, a little tougher this week, but also pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with it. I think I'm gonna do Kyler, Tua, and Davis Mills.
Kyler, dude, I like it, man. Absolutely like it.
To your
going to the running back position here. Sucks Sony's out. He was probably gonna be one of the top plays, but I just want to talk about it. Let's talk about the guys that are the most expensive here at the top first. Najee Harris 78, Ezekiel Elliott 73. Joe Mixon, 72. As you said, it's kind of odd not seeing a running back over 8K, but that is what it is. At those running backs at the top, where does your interest lie?
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. Like, there's no McCaffrey on the slate. Derrick Henry's also injured. Like, there's all these guys that we're used to seeing up there who just aren't even on the slate or they're hurt. And yeah, 7,800 Najee Harris is the top priced one. I think of these 3, I'd probably most likely to play Joe Mixon at 7,200.
Love it.
It's interesting because his price was climbing each week. He was getting 2 touchdowns every week. And then all of a sudden, these last 2 weeks, he's getting 10 and 9 fantasy points and falls back down to 7,200. But he's still getting 20 touches in these games, and they're still fighting for that division to get a good playoff seed. And the game against the Broncos, I think, is like a decent spot for him to sort of bounce back and find the end zone here or there. They love to give him the ball in the red zone.
They love to run the ball. The Bengals love to run the ball.
They do like to run. So he's probably going to get his 20 touches, which also he gets a lot of balls thrown to him, and the last 2 weeks he hasn't really been. So if he just comes back to where he was 3-4 weeks ago, then he's by far the best running back on this entire slate, I'd say. And his upside is way higher than a lot of these other guys because of how many touchdowns they like to get just hand fed to him. He already has 14 touchdowns on the year and over 1,000 rushing yards. Like, he's a guy who's a focal point in this offense, and there's so many other players on this list that are injured or splitting time that
or just aren't
I'm most confident with Mixon.
And just to add on to that, I mean, the Broncos' run defense is currently 25th DVOA. I mean, that's bottom 7 run DVOA defense. And over the second half of the season here for the Broncos' run defense, they're allowing the highest rushing success rate in the league. We know that the Bengals want to run the football for some reason or another, and it looks like they're playing a team that will allow them to run the football. So Mixon for me is one of my favorite plays, and especially considering his price is very affordable. I mean, to see him at 72 is a pretty easy thing. When you're like, oh, my top running back I'm looking at this week is 7,200. I mean, that's a good place to be.
The thing is, you don't really have to pay up, but if I were to pay up, it would be him.
Yep. All right. Now's where it gets a little ugly. I mean, so let's get this out of the way first before we go to the ugly. James Robinson, Urban's gone, 5,400. Dude's chalk. I mean, I expect to see like a 35% ownership on him. I don't think like anyone listening to this that plays DFS probably has already thought about James Robinson. But just real quick, give me your thoughts on what you're doing with him. Is he a block must play, or is he a smart pivot?
Yeah. Do you have any concern of his recent usage? And
I think it was all Urban Meyer. I think it was
Yeah.
the
So you think
injury.
the coach
Maybe
change is just going to be
yes,
enough to get
yes,
him back to
100%.
20 touches, 15 plus touches,
Yes,
let's say. And
yes.
obviously the matchup is great at home against the Houston Texans. So 5,400, he just seems like a pretty obvious play in cash. But if he's going to have ownership like that, it's pretty easy to get off of him. There's a lot of guys in the 5K range who are decent plays as well.
Hmm.
But he's probably the safest, at least for running backs. 5,400 for a guy who we've seen his upside in the past, and one of, if not the best matchups Jaguars are going to have all season, and like one of their best chances at winning a game. And like I said earlier, one of the options when a coach is gone is the team just rallies behind each other and come out to try to get a victory.
Yep. I mean, kind of saw that with the Raiders a little bit too, but I think this
Yeah.
is even a worse case because I think everyone hated Urban Meyer, and I didn't think everyone hated John Gruden. But
Yeah.
no, I mean to elaborate on the point a little bit, I almost was certain that there was like fights going on internally about like why aren't they playing James Robinson, and it was Urban Meyer who wanted to play Hyde. So, and he's the reason Hyde went there in the first place. I mean, all the respect for Carlos Hyde and the career he's had, but he is just nowhere near the back that James Robinson is. And I think Darrell Bevel, who is now taking over as the interim head coach, a guy that is team established the run. Like this dude wants to run the damn football, and he knows he has a pretty damn good back to do it. So I see James Robinson is a pretty great play. Another guy I want to talk about, we can start kind of rattle him off from here. A guy that I'm not on again. I was, pat my own back here, but in week 14, I was off of Jeff Wilson at 4,400. I know everyone wanted to play him with Elijah Mitchell out again. Already kind of touched on this matchup in terms of the Falcons, how they've been stout against the run. That is kind of a check mark against Jeff Wilson. And then last week, we saw a lot of Debo. And there's even Hasty got some looks in the pass game. Jeff Wilson didn't get a single target last week. Like not a single one. And it was, relatively close game, maybe not the whole way through, but 13 attempts, 56 yards, no targets. And his price went up 600. Jeff Wilson is a guy I expect to have a decent amount of ownership, especially now with Sony out. But he's a guy that I'm not interested in. Jeff Wilson, your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of like him. I think it's a good matchup for it. One thing we were talking about before the stream was the Sony Michel ownership has to go somewhere. I think James Robinson's was already going to be as high as it's going to be. And I think a lot of people are going to shift to Jeff Wilson because of the matchup against the Falcons. So I kind of like it. Like I do have some concern about the pass game role. In the past, we had seen him getting a lot more targets, but also just be careful if Elijah Mitchell was to play this game, then Jeff Wilson almost just completely comes off the board for me. But didn't have any targets last week. So it's concerning to me as far as like his upside goes at 5K. There are some other guys in this range that even like a David Johnson 4,900. I think if people are going to play Jeff Wilson more, I would rather play David Johnson, as gross as it is to say.
Fair enough. I mean, there's a lot of pretty gross guys that we have some interest in here this week. So
COVID week.
Yeah, it's just the way that cookie crumbles. I mean, let's just go down the list. Some of the thoughts I have. I mean, Michael Carter, 4,700. I mean, he's one of the cheaper backs that we're interested in. He looks like he is a full go, and he has been good when he has been asked to play. I mean, it's I'm not 100% sure. It says there are reports 2 hours ago saying that he'll have a significant role in week 15, which is you absolutely love to see that. And then you just kind of take a look. So where I'm expecting him to be activated off IR, and then you look at the games when he was actually like playing well. I mean, he had a good little run there from week 4 to week 8. Even 18 points in week 10. I mean, when he's on the field, I think he was in the middle of a breakout to be a solid RB2 for your fantasy team. So at 4,700, I mean, we're going to talk about some guys that, we talked about Jeff Wilson. We talked about David Johnson. I mean, there's other guys we're going to get off the board here. But I think for me, Michael Carter is my second favorite play beyond Mixon.
Yeah. I think in this talk and just looking at the list almost makes me more want to play Mixon, because all these guys are going to have questions and all these guys have concerns of workload. I think Michael Carter, he's coming back from injury. You don't know if they're going to want to give him a full role, but it's also a pretty good matchup for him to get his full role. We have seen him get a decent amount of work in the passing game, so that's obviously great for DraftKings scoring.
Mm-hmm.
If he's gonna have his full workload, he's probably gonna have somewhere in the range of 15 touches, probably like 12 to 15 touches is the expectation,
Mm-hmm.
but like 3 of those you're expected through the air. So I think Michael Carter in this matchup, last time he was in the game against the Dolphins, he had 60 yards on the ground and he had a catch as well in that game. So, I mean, the floor on all of these guys are a little suspect, but I think because we've seen Michael Carter have a game this year with 14 targets and another one with 9 targets, I think he has upside that someone like David Johnson doesn't have.
Fair enough. I would agree with that. Another running back to at least consider, I know this is gross, folks, but this is just where we are, is D'Onta Foreman is 5,200 against Pittsburgh. A couple things about, one, it's a matchup. I mean, the Steelers absolutely hemorrhage points to RBs, especially as of late. They're absolutely trash. I mean, it is a dream matchup for a run. It's not like the Jets, but it's close in terms of a dream matchup for the running back. And I think more so what sticks out to me here is the Titans last week, they blew out the Jags 20-0. It wasn't even close. But in the first half, when it was still close, D'Onta Foreman got 13 of the 17 running back touches in that first half. Then we saw a little bit of Hilliard mixed in, and then we saw McNichols at the end of the game when it was just a blowout. But it does seem like D'Onta Foreman is the lead guy there. At 5,200, I feel decently comfortable with him, talking about maybe a third back behind Mixon and Carter that I like. But again, it's an ugly week. Your thoughts on Foreman?
Yeah, I think he's right there with me, probably above Wilson even.
I'd agree.
I think in this range, it's kind of like James Robinson, then Carter and Foreman are very similar to me. Carter, obviously more likely to be part of the pass game, but I think you could play the two of them together. I think Foreman's probably the better play as far as like a running back goes, but because on DraftKings they have the full point PPR, he's not huge in the pass game, so I don't think I think that's where Michael Carter has more of the upside. But against the Steelers, who if they don't have Big Ben too, we could see the Titans just get out to an early lead, and we've seen it in the past with the Titans that if they get a comfortable lead early on, they're just going to run the ball a bunch. And
are the Titans one of the sneakiest 9-4 teams this season?
Especially with Derrick Henry hurt.
Yeah, man, and AJ Brown pretty much been out all season too, man.
Yeah.
And Julio's been out most season. Yeah, it's honestly pretty impressive. All right, running back's ugly, man. Any other running backs you feel like I guess I forgot one. Saquon Barkley, 6,500 against Dallas. Interest there?
Yeah, somewhat. He's probably the other guy who you could be. I don't know if I want to use the word comfortable with, but he's a little harder to fail. And what I mean by fail is like under 10 points than a lot of the other guys in this range.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of did it last week. I don't know. Would we say he did it? Like the problem is, I don't think he has the same upside as he once did.
Yeah, I would agree. But he 3x last week, man.
Yeah, I mean, he had 18 points, and that might be really his top. But
yeah, unfortunately, just about.
I think he's as safe as any of those other guys that we talked about to get 15 touches, and all he needs is a lot of that's just opportunity. But if the Giants do come out and play this game tough against the Cowboys in any way, then I think a lot of that's going to go through Barkley.
That will be on the back of Saquon Barkley. So I like
unless Mike Glennon's stealing rushing TDs from him again.
Oh Jesus, we haven't talked about Myles Gaskin, man. Hit me. It's playing the Jets.
Yeah, I think if you're not playing Tua in a lineup, it's very sharp to play Gaskin in it. You can just run the ball in the Jets. The problem with Gaskin comes up pretty much every week. They don't like giving him full workloads like some of these other running backs. However, the last few weeks, he's been getting more touches. Last time he faced these Jets, he had 18 fantasy points. Pretty much has a floor of a couple catches and like 15 carries now. So it seems like they're more comfortable giving him full workloads than they were at the beginning of the season. So for me, like he's in a pretty good spot. I think a lot of that Stoney ownership's probably going to go to him. I mentioned the Wilson stuff. I think people will go to Wilson and Gaskin with the Sony, but depending on what kind of news we get on Eli Mitchell, that might just all go to Gaskin.
Yeah, I think things are looking doubtful for Eli Mitchell at this point in time.
Yeah.
I kind of doubt he didn't practice today on Friday with a concussion and a knee injury. So I think the writing's on the wall in terms of he's still in an NFL's concussion protocol on Friday, and he has a knee injury. So I am not counting on that one at all. Any other running backs you want to talk about?
Nope.
All right.
We covered
pool of 4. A little bit of a struggle, but hit me, Luke.
I'll go Mixon, Robinson, Gaskin, and Donta Foreman.
I like it. And Donta Foreman. Love the call there, man. Going to the wide receiver position, Cooper Kupp. He is no longer there with us. The top play of the week. A lot of people's matchups are going to come down on a Tuesday with Cooper Kupp in their playoff matchups, and people are going to either be sweating pretty hard either way with that one. But I digress. That leaves at the top. We'll just do our arbitrary cutoff as always. Devonte Adams, 89. Deebo Samuel, 82. And Stephon Diggs, 77. Thoughts on these upper end wide receivers?
Man, it's just such a gross slate. Like you have so much salary on the slate, especially if you're going to play 2 or 3 of those 5K running backs. Now Cooper Kupp isn't available. For me, my favorite of those guys, I mean, it probably has to be Devonte Adams.
Yes.
I mean, he just like 3 straight weeks over 100 yards. He is something that we mentioned earlier. Like, he's one of the only players that can break this slate wide open at this point in time. Like, there's no high-end running backs.
And Deebo's not getting the receptions to do it as of late.
Yeah. And Diggs, you're already saying how the Panthers are pretty stout against the pass. So Deontay Johnson's, it depends. Like, Ben is pretty much hurt, and is Rudolph going to be able to give him a big game? So that to me just leaves Devonte Adams, and assuming Rodgers plays. That's the other thing. Rodgers has been missing some practices this week as well, but I think he's trending towards playing. And in that sense, like, to me, Devonte Adams probably my favorite high-end player across the board.
I like the call. Let's dive into some of these cheaper wide receivers. One that's going to stick out to me almost immediately, and I know we just talked about this, but it's the price, is Emmanuel Sanders is doubtful with a knee injury, and Gabriel Davis is just 3,700. We talked about fading this passing matchup, and I get it, but Gabriel Davis has done a lot with a little all season long, and now he's going to get a lot. So there's something that, like, all the dude is like, he just catches touchdowns. But it's just one of those things with 3,700, like, do we need to save the money? Maybe not necessarily, but at the same time, it does leave you a lot of flexibility for a 3,700 wide receiver that's likely having a full-time role on an offense who's still going to probably try to pass it, albeit bad matchup.
Yeah. To me, it's like for 3,700, it's something that it's a lot easier to stomach, because the downside risk is, I mean, it's there with him until these last couple weeks where he had touchdowns. Like, he wasn't getting you double-digit fantasy points even when given more opportunity. But I think I read that this past week was the most snaps he's seen all season. And if they're going to be focusing on Diggs, then to me, Gabriel Davis doesn't have to do a ton. But the fact that he's got 2 straight weeks with a touchdown says to me that they're willing to throw him the ball in the red zone, which gets that upside there. And he can get there on the 3,700 price tag without having a 100-yard game or anything
just
like
takes
that.
one
He could
catch.
have
It's one catch.
4 catches for 50 yards and
it's
like be okay.
it's one catch for a touchdown, or as you said, 3 or 4 catches for 50 yards, and it's not even a problem.
Yeah. So to me, I really like him at a cheap option. The other cheap guy that's kind of he's going to be pretty highly owned is Devonte Parker
Yep.
at 4,300.
Oh yeah. With
Without
no
Waddle there.
Yep.
And the thing with Parker is, I mean, he every game he goes out there, he's at risk of leaving early from injury, but he basically has a floor of 5 catches in games that even Waddle was in. So it's hard for me to see him score less than like 10 fantasy points in this spot. So Devonte Parker is going to be pretty highly owned. Gabriel Davis is going to be pretty highly owned for like a cheap guy. But Parker's role is way closer on the end of alpha than Gabriel Davis's is. So if you can find the 600, like I probably would rather go to Parker, even if you're eating that chalk.
Another player that intrigues me, Amon-Ra St. Brown with no Hockenson. Hockenson is out for the year. He has seen back-to-back games of 12 targets, and now Hawk is back, and now Hawk is out for the season. He's seen 8 receptions and 10 receptions over the last 2 weeks. The floor seems to be there with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's starting to come around. He's a rookie. I know it's kind of a crapshoot here with the Lions trying to figure out who they are, but he does seem to be the guy that at least is going to be getting the volume. Your thoughts on him at 5,200?
Yeah, his price has gone up, but part of that has to do with he's earning it. I think he's in like a decent spot. The other side of that game, Christian Kirk's 5,300, also somewhat interesting, but with the St. Brown stuff, like, I don't know. Are you concerned with Josh Reynolds being somewhat more of the number one there?
Yeah, but he's more.
St. Brown has a better chance.
He's the underneath guy. He's the slot guy.
Yeah.
It's the volume. I mean, Reynolds probably better chance to catch a tutty, but he's running actual routes down the field, and Goff doesn't have a tendency to throw those. I mean, he's a dump off guy. It's like he's been throwing to Hockenson and Swift short almost all season long, and now Hawkinson's gone, and it looks like Swift is still going to be sitting out. I mean, it just seems like another 10 to 12. I mean, I'm not going to project 10 to 12 targets coming his way, but it definitely seems like it's well within that range of outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's fair. To me, I think, yeah, those are kind of the guys. Beasley's 49, but like we said, I think if I'm going to play a Bills wide receiver this week, it's oddly enough going to end up being Gabriel Davis.
Mm-hmm. Are we stacking Brandon Cooks with your Davis Mills?
Yeah.
Love it.
5,800. Like he doesn't get love.
No,
it's weird.
Never does.
Like he probably should be like 6,500, and it's weird to me that he didn't get priced up more after having a 100-yard game last week. He went from 5,700 to 5,800. And he's kind of been doing this all season where he'll have these not like breakout games, but he's the clear number one in this offense. And if I'm playing a lineup with Davis Mills, I almost have to have Brandon Cooks in there. He might get somewhat owned just because of everything going on in the slate, and the mini stack with James Robinson seems pretty good to me. I don't know why I'm getting like Brighton, but
it's good. The audio's good. We're rolling.
Yeah, basically, Brandon Cooks is the guy that I want, and I don't think I would be double stacking Davis Mills. I don't think you need to.
Fair enough. Wide receivers, any other you'd like to touch on here, Lou?
I think someone who's going to be interesting. There's a couple guys who like we haven't talked about, and I feel like people aren't really they're not like over these guys, but I would, if I'm in that range, the upper end, Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb are kind of interesting to me.
They can break the slate. Absolutely.
They have the upside, and Lamb's starting to get the usage back that we saw earlier in the season, back-to-back games with at least 10 targets, facing the Giants. If you have a Dak stack, he's the guy I'm going with. I know. I think that was last week. I was talking up playing Amari Cooper in those stacks, but I think I want to get CD in them. And then Jamar Chase, people are not like he's not forgotten by any means, but it seems like Higgins is getting more of the show. And last week, Jamar had 2 touchdowns and 25 fantasy points. So those 2 guys I would prefer to play over the Deontay Johnsons and Debo Samuels.
Agreed. You ready for the pool of 4 wide receivers, Lou?
Yeah. For me, I'm doing Devonte Adams. CD is going to be in that. And then I'll go down to Devonte Parker and Cooks.
Love it. Over to tight end. This is one of those weeks. If you've been paying attention to the price of the quarterbacks we've been talking about, the running backs we've been talking about, and the wide receivers we've been talking about, there is plenty of cash if you want to pay up at the tight end position. And we have 2 of the more elite tight ends on this slate at George Kittle at 75 and Mark Andrews at 64. Both of these gentlemen have absolutely been smashing as of late. I mean, Kittle went back-to-back, 37 DK points, 42 DK points, breaking slates there. And then, of course, Andrews. We have a quarterback situation to think about here, but, I mean, even last week with Huntley, he still went 11 for 11, 115 and a tutty. So both of these guys.
If Huntley is playing, it's more reason to play Andrews because it seems like that was his guy.
Yeah, exactly. So, you've already touched on Andrews a bit, but thoughts on Andrews and or Kittle?
To me, like we've already talked about how there's not a lot of great, like high end priced guys. So on a different week, 7,500 for Kittle would just be like too much for me. But he's been smashing, and this is another great matchup that they have. So I could see you getting there. I probably won't go there, but I mean, I also haven't in the past couple of weeks either, and it's kind of burned me. But we're still in this scenario where there's a lot of high end tight ends. Andrews, I think, unless we have Huntley, I don't know how interested I am in it. At 6,400 now, it was cheap in the past, but probably my favorite is Gesicki.
I was just about to say Gesicki with no Waddle, man. The volume should be there.
Yeah, Mike mentioned it in the chat. This just seems like the guy you want to stack Tua with this week to me is going to be Gesicki. There's going to be a lot of people that play Tua, Gesicki, and Devonte Parker for pretty cheap overall.
Very easy stack and a very good matchup.
Here's my issue with Gesicki. Let me know if you agree. Like, it doesn't seem like he has touchdown upside. Like last year, it seemed like he had a lot more touchdown upside. This year, he only has 2 all season. So to me, he has 1 game over 100 yards and no games over 1 touchdown. So do you think he has the upside even in this matchup? Last time they faced the Jets, he went 5 for 50, which is okay, but it's not like separating you, especially if he's going to get owned. So to me, I'd probably only play Gesicki in a Tua stack.
Yep, I would agree. I'm finding ways to get Andrews or not Pitts, Andrews or Kittle in there, but Gesicki with Tua, I agree.
And then if you're not going up there, I know we talk. It's weird that this is a guy that I almost just said like talk about every week, but kind of do is James O'Shaughnessy. Just keeps getting so many targets, but he's not doing much with those targets. Hasn't gotten a touchdown, hasn't hit 50 yards yet on the season, but 3,200 if you need some savings. This is once again like a good matchup. I don't know. Is there really any other tight ends? That's the thing with Gesicki is like there's not really good tight ends to go to, and you don't necessarily need the savings to go down to O'Shaughnessy this week. Maybe someone like
Are we going back to the Zebra King Brock Wright?
Oh man, I mean,
I'm not doing
Cardinals
it. But this is the week
he did get 5 targets, but the Cardinals have been pretty good against.
No, I'm with you. I'm not playing Brock Wright. I just wanted to say Zebra King.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there like literally anyone else who kind of looks good? I mean, I was ready to play Higbee. Obviously, we can't. Gerald Everett on the other side of that game. Goddard also got moved.
Yeah,
Like
it's
a
tough.
lot of these guys we are looking to play aren't going to be playing. Someone like a Noah Fant, maybe, but
I'd rather play Alberto.
Oh, so you would just go with Alberto?
Yep, I would
Yeah.
go with Alberto.
Um.
If I had to choose between him and Fant at the price, I'd go
Oh,
Alberto.
you know who if you're gonna this is like maybe the grossest.
Are we double
stack I've
stacking
ever
tight ends?
No, this is probably the grossest stack I've ever suggested on a slate. Is Davis Mills, Brandon Cooks, Brevin Jordan. I mean, 2,800 for a guy. He's got a touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. He had 7 targets last week. He's not doing much with the targets, but man, if you want to do something like get those guys and James Robinson on the way back, you could probably play Lamb and Chase in that lineup. There's a lot of stuff you can do. Oh man, am I gonna play Brevin Jordan in the year 2021 in a fantasy DFS lineup?
I think you are. I think you already talked yourself into it.
It doesn't sound great, but I mean, I don't think it's the worst thing. When we're looking at these tight ends, it's like there's nothing that is really appealing to me on the lower end. And at least that this is probably one of those weeks where you're pairing your tight end with your quarterback, whichever quarterback you decide on. Someone like Schultz is in play, I think, if you're doing a Dak lineup. I don't know. Is there anyone else in there? Do you think you'd play Albert O over someone like Brevin Jordan?
No, I'm just paying up, man. It's just the week I pay up a tight
don't
end.
even worry about the cheaper ones. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Well,
close it off with the defense, special teams, man. Anything sticking out to you?
Not really. I think if you're gonna play the fade Tua idea, you could go with the Jets. It's kind of gross, but I think I'd prefer the Jets over like the Lions this week. Depending on injuries, I think is going to determine a lot of this. But this is probably a week where you pay up at defense. My favorite defense is probably Bengals, 2,900 against Teddy Bridgewater and the Broncos. They've been getting a lot of sacks recently as well. So it pulls up their floor a little bit. They've had until last week, they were getting 3 turnovers in 3 straight games. So to me, I think Bengals are probably my favorite under 3K. And then if you're going to go up, Cowboys is probably, if you can get up to 3,600 and you have the salary, Cowboys is pretty good against Mike Glennon. 49ers against the Falcons are also a pretty good one. So I don't know. Anything else you think?
I would say no, not really, man.
Maybe Titans if Big Ben doesn't play and they're facing Rudolph. They had 4 picks last week. Titans defense. Maybe that's how the Titans have gotten their 9 wins. Is their defense is good enough.
I kind of like that Titans play 3K.
Yeah. To me, it's like Bengals, Titans, 49ers. Probably going to end up playing one of those 3, whichever one kind of fits with the rest of my lineup.
All right, y'all. It's a tough slate this week with a lot of the good plays moving around. Even before those plays moved around, it was still kind of a tough slate. So might be playing a little light in the cash, dabbling more in the GPPs, but figured out. We got the advice you needed. Lou, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think just pay attention to COVID news if any more pops up. Backups, especially at like the quarterback position, is probably going to determine a lot of the ownership in this slate. But yeah, there's also a Saturday slate, which now only has 2 games, right? So
1 game.
It's down to the one. Okay,
it's down to the one.
So
it's showdown.
Yeah, I mean,
but
we're gonna have football for starting tomorrow. We're gonna have football for the next 4 days.
We have football after today.
Just due to Tuesday now.
We have football 8 of the next 10 days.
Oh yeah, it's the one day Wednesday off, and then everything else we're going
Yeah.
for it. So a lot of football coming up, which is good for us viewers, especially if I don't know how much the world is going to be starting to shut things down, but it's nice to see that they're pushing it, but not pushing them to different weeks, because there's a lot of people that are in fantasy season-long playoffs, which it's going to be a wild week for that if you're sweating it out
Oh
until
my
Tuesday.
God. It's going to be a little bit nuts.
So.
But anyways, all right. You can find Lou on Twitter at Lou Dog Sherman. Find me on Twitter at FF Tyler O. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.